Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Thursday and I thought it would be fun since Friday the 13th is tomorrow to rank the Friday the 13th films from best to worst. So here are my picks for the best to worst Friday the 13th films. Let's jump right into it. So we're going to be doing our ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise in this video from best to worst. And I know that your opinion will probably be different than mine, and that's okay because all film is subjective. And I love the Friday the 13th franchise. I don't think there's any of these movies that I don't love. So breaking down this list was kind of a little bit hard. So let's jump into my picks for the best to the worst. So coming in at the absolute best for me, of course, is Friday the 13th Part 2. Friday the 13th Part 2 had Jenny, which is my favorite final girl in the franchise other than Alice. But Alice didn't fight Jason. I'm talking in terms of the people who fought Jason. Jenny is definitely my favorite. She is the definitive final girl for me. And Jason is legitimately scary in this movie. Even though you don't see him that much, for the short time that you see Jason, it is impactful. And the plot to this movie delivers on the scares. Coming in at number 2 is the original Friday the 13th, because the original Friday the 13th is an absolute classic. It is one of those movies that you just have to see at least once. It redefined the slasher genre. It really did, because this movie, before this movie came out, you didn't have the bird's eye view of the slasher. That only came after Friday the 13th did it. There might have been one or two times before this, but this was the one that actually made that a thing. And all the other imitators and copies and clone movies that came out that did this took that from Friday the 13th. And not to mention, the end of Friday the 13th is sort of a shock. Now, this is where my list might differ a little bit from other people's, because I know a lot of people really love Part 6. They love 6 with a passion. Jason Lives is a lot of people's definitive Friday the 13th film. I actually love that film too, but my third favorite movie in the Friday the 13th franchise is actually New Blood. Now, this is the reason why. In New Blood, we get to meet a character who is able to actually hurt Jason in ways we've never seen before. And sure, it's a little bit carry, but it actually works in the context of this movie. Now, I know a lot of people had a problem with New Blood. Some of the things in New Blood people just didn't like. For example, the father coming back and all that, people didn't really like that. And I agree that is one of the dumber parts of the movie. But what you have to realize is that if we're going to take Jason Voorhees and continue to bring him back to life, sure, there's other characters within the franchise who might have that same thing going on. So I kind of let that one slide, much to my dismay. Now, next up on my list is, of course, the final chapter. And the reason the final chapter is in this spot is because this is another time when Jason Voorhees could legit be hurt by someone. And that someone, of course, is Tommy Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis is the person who should have come back time and time again. And his departure from this franchise after Part 6 really helped to make it suffer a little bit, I think. Honestly, if he had been in New Blood, along with our final girl that's already in that movie, I really think it would have upped that movie a lot. It would have made that movie so much better. But Tommy Jarvis actually killed Jason. And that's right, he killed Jason in this movie. And that's why it is actually one of my favorites. Sure, you can argue that other movies in this franchise have already killed Jason. Part 2 and Part 3 kind of already did that. But you can also argue that there was some magical way he could have lived. In this movie, he is definitively dead. He has been beaten. And Tommy Jarvis was made into an absolute icon and legend in the Friday the 13th series for that reason. Which brings us to my next favorite movie, and my next favorite movie is the one everybody loves, of course, Jason Lives. Jason Lives is filled with comedy, and that's partially one of the reasons it's not as high on my list. Sure, I love the film with a passion, and I watch it any chance I can get. If that is on, I am tuning in, which I can't even say about all the films in the franchise. I could say it about most, but this one, definitely I am tuning in every time it's on. The only reason it's not higher in the list is because it relies heavily on comedy, whereas there are plenty other Jason films where the scares are more in tune with what you are used to in a slasher film. There is one scene, however, where this girl who does absolutely nothing wrong is brutally taken out. Like, we don't even see it on screen, and it's still one of the most haunting scenes ever for me. It's the one scene that disturbs me more than any other scene in any other Friday the 13th movie in existence. That brings us to our next pick, which is part 3. Friday the 13th Part 3 for me was something that I had a lot of problems with. I didn't like it for a very long time, and the reason was I just felt it was kind of but then I started to appreciate this film a lot more. Not only is it the film where Jason gets his iconic mask, but the performances and the character development as I got older, I really appreciated a lot. Not to mention the film was originally shot in 3D, so while the effects look cheesy if you're watching the 2D version, if you actually ever get a chance to see the 3D version of this movie, you owe it to yourself to check it out. It is one of the most wonderful things to see this movie in 3D the way it was originally intended. Alright, so next up is Friday the 13th, The New Beginning. And Friday the 13th, The New Beginning is one of those films that a lot of people do have a problem with. A lot of people would have ranked this probably at the bottom of all of their listings. The reason that I rank this one a little bit higher is because this was kind of one of those films. This was one of those films that took a chance. And while you may not agree with the chance, it becomes where the tagline mattered. The tagline asks the question, does Jason still haunt you? And Tommy Jarvis has been going from mental hospital to mental hospital. He ends up in this sort of halfway house of sorts where he is essentially next to some woods, of all things, and Jason reappears again. And the question is it Jason or is Tommy actually going insane? And I love the fact that it turned it into sort of this mystery. Is Tommy doing this? Is this Jason? Has Jason somehow returned? Well, we know the answer because Jason will return in the next movie, but that's the thing here. The surprise shock at the end was somewhat shocking. Alright, so next up in my ranking is Jason Takes Manhattan, and the reason it's this low in the ranking is because I oftentimes use this to describe what's wrong with writing. Now, let me explain. First off, this movie is taking Jason out of his element, which is actually pretty cool. It doesn't always deliver where it should, and I realize why a lot of people don't like the movie. However, I enjoy most of this movie. My problem is the end. After the ending of this movie and the way it ends, we never again address this ending at all. We never see anyone pick up from this point, whereas in previous Jason movies, he is usually left where we found him last. This one, however, doesn't do that. And I think the reason it doesn't do that is that it honestly can't. A lot of writers aren't really writing Jason out of the situations that he was in last. And I always call that sort of lazy writing. I always feel that writers should be able to write the character from wherever they were last left to wherever they want to take them next. And that's the only reason this one is in this place. Other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie for what it was. Next up is Jason Goes to Hell, because Jason Goes to Hell took another turn. Whereas some of the movies decided to take Jason other places, this one took Jason to a new level. making it obvious that Jason could body hop, and that would explain why he hasn't been dying. I think the movie suffered again from not having Tommy Jarvis come back to explain to us why this was. However, we got the character of Crichton Duke, and Crichton Duke is an awesome character. I really love that character, and I thought he was another one that should have popped up in other movies possibly, only we never got to see that happen. The movie takes a drastic change from what we're used to, and it delivers for the most part. Either you love this movie or you hate this movie, but that's kind of where I stand on it. I don't hate it, but it is by far one of my least favorite Friday the 13th films. Next up, of course, is Freddy vs. Jason. The reason that Freddy vs. Jason is this low in my ranking is simple, because sometimes it felt like they tried a little too hard to put them into each other's lore. It should have been a great crossover, and for the most part it is, and I would have loved to have seen more crossovers with a lot more characters from other franchises jumping in, a la Universal Pictures. It would have been really great. However, we never got to see that happen, and the movie is beloved by some and hated by others, and I can understand both points of view. Next up is Jason X, and Jason X is this low in our franchise ranking because, well, taking Jason into space was absolutely crazy, and it's not that I don't like this film. Some of the kills in this film are absolutely brutal, and they are awesome to watch. I think I have a problem with Jason being in space overall, but once he's in space, it's perfectly okay. And Jason's upgrade in this movie is fun to watch. I'm not even gonna lie, it is absolutely fun to see him get some cybernetic type of upgrade, some future type of look. That makes this movie a lot of fun. Last on our list is the Friday the 13th reboot remake, because this movie sort of turned Jason into a little bit more of a Rambo-esque figure. Sure, he's always set traps. We know Jason sets traps. We know that he does the things he does. We know that he can run if he needs to. We've seen it in movies. A lot of people had a problem with Jason being fast in this movie. I didn't have a problem with it being fast. I just didn't want to know Jason was setting traps. Not to mention, the movie is sort of a hodgepodge of parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it sort of mixes everything together in this melting pot of unlikable characters. It's really one of my most unliked movies in the Friday the 13th franchise, but I still appreciate it for what it was. Derek Mears did amazing as Jason, and I would love to see him come back and get a chance to play him again. That being said, that is why this movie is the last on my list, simply because I didn't like any of the characters. I liked Jason in the movie, and that was really about it. Now that is my rankings of the Friday the 13th movies from best to worst. All film is subjective, and I do want to hear what you guys think. I want to hear your thoughts on which are the best Friday the 13th films and which are the worst. What is the order that you think they should be ranked in? As always, we want to hear from you guys. Make sure you're leaving us that comment in the comment box below. Make sure you share this video with all of your friends. They're going to want to be a part of this conversation as well. Don't forget to hit that like button. It's free, it helps the channel, and we really do appreciate it. Then Miko says we need more subscribers. And look at this face. You don't want to disappoint Miko, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell while you're down there so you don't miss a single video we do. Then friends, at the end of the day, I know it, you know it, and Miko knows it. Fandom is family.